everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's Diving Deeper. As you can see, we have a special guest, Yvonne, here. And also, as you can see, we're doing things a little bit differently for this week's Diving Deeper. It's part of the fun of this whole series is that we can mix it up and give you different looks in terms of how you're receiving this. So, Yvonne, today you continued our happiness series, talking about, different ways that we can be happy. And I know you mentioned several of them in your sermon, but I was just wondering if you, kind of like what we do on Diving Deeper, unpack a little bit further, and if you have any other suggestions or ways that we can be happy.
Sure. I think that one of the major ways is basically how we treat our mind and the things that we think about. And so consequently, one of the huge things for me is that I have a joke of the day that I have on my cell phone.
Sure.
And they're typically horrible puns, terrible humor, groaners, but nonetheless, it just gives you that sense of something that life is not that serious. So I think it's really, really important to invest in that time, because worrying, we're investing a ton of time emotionally and psychologically, physically and spiritually. Why would we not do things to make ourselves happier?
Sure.
So that's one way.
Okay. Very cool. Now, for me, I know in my daily life, sometimes I come across people who are not so happy, or the grumps in life. And, one of the characteristics or one of the effects of those people, and I'm sure they don't do it intentionally, but one of the effects that those people have on even the happiest person's life is sometimes that person or me or you watching can get caught in their cycle of grumpiness or unpleasantness. And so just wondering, do you have any suggestions or maybe even a verse that you could offer us about, that we can meditate so we can avoid getting caught up in that whirlpool of unhappiness?
Yeah. First of all, I always call it a vortex. Coming from the Midwest and living in a world of tornadoes.
Sure.
The one thing that they tell you is always go to the most center part of your house and as deep as you can get. So it may be, if you're lucky enough to have a cellar, you go down into the cellar. And I think it's the same thing for us when we're dealing with people. For lack of better terms, they're toxic. You had mentioned that you said that, well, maybe they're not doing it intentionally, and that may be true. But, I want you to think about the last time that you weren't feeling happy or grumpy. And it's this whole idea of if I'm not happy, nobody else is going to be happy. There's some of that going on, and we have to be real about that.
True.
But the other thing that I always had told my patients in the years of practicing psychotherapy is that when people would say, well, I'm always getting hooked into this other person's drama and their anger and their frustration and so on and so forth. So I would always say to them, then if you don't want to get hooked, don't swim in their pond.
That's good. I like that.
And so when I think about a scripture, I always think about Philippians 4 of rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice, like the song that we sang today, and also that the scripture goes on to talk about the idea of think on these things, whatever is lovely, whatever is pure, whatever is kind. These are the things to fill your hearts. And I love it because they say your mind. And our mind is definitely the gateway to our heart. And so consequently, I think that, again, dwelling on Scripture, and there's tons and tons of Scripture that continuously reminds us not to worry, not to fret about tomorrow, to be people that live in the moment right now and not worry about these other things, because worrying will change absolutely nothing except maybe our blood pressure.
True. That's a very good point, and I definitely like the don't swim in their pond if you don't want to get hooked. That's good advice for myself and for anybody. So, Yvonne, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the sermon this morning. And to all of you, thank you for joining us this week. Since you're watching, go ahead and leave a comment below. And if it has to do with, even if you have questions about how else we can avoid getting caught up in other people's vortexes of unhappiness, go ahead and leave that down below, and we'll get it to Yvonne, and she can reach out to us and let us know, and we can pass that information on to you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.